Welcome to the online training series on sustainable food in tourism brought to you by the One Planet Sustainable Tourism Program. Thank you all very much for your interest and for connecting today to this session. If you have been following this online training series, you know that this is the fourth session on food waste management. If you could not attend the previous sessions, we are delighted to inform you that the recordings and presentations of the previous trainings are now available online in their corresponding web pages. I am Roxana Ashtari, project specialist at the Sustainable Development of Tourism Department at UNWTO, and it's my pleasure to be facilitating this session today with my colleague Virginia Fernandez Trapa, Program Officer, Sustainable Development of Tourism at UNWTO. So today we will start with the introduction to the joint program on sustainable food, where we are collaborating with other UN agencies and which provides the context for the implementation of these trainings. You might already know the program which we presented during the previous session, but we will have a short recap for the ones joining us today for the first time. Then we will introduce the global roadmap for food waste reduction in tourism sector, and then we will move into the actual training on food waste management. Basically, today's session is focused on raising awareness for the problems surrounding food waste, highlighting the main causes for food waste in tourism, providing practical solutions to reduce food waste in hotels and restaurants. It also might be interesting for you to know that research indicates that currently 1/3 of all global meals goes to waste. This is highly critical from an ethical and social point of view, considering there are more than 800,000 malnourished people in the world. Studies in hotels have shown that 20 to 60% of all food purchased to provide a culinary experience is thrown away. These figures are alarming, but it has also been proven that at least 30% of the food loss in the tourism industry can be avoided through systematic measures along the value chain. So it's very clear to all of us that reducing food waste means saving CO2 emissions, saving precious water resources, and last but not least, saving considerable operating cost. And the last part of today's session will hopefully be devoted to the Q&A sessions, and then you can present your question to us. So just let us share with you some housekeeping rules to ensure the smooth session. Please note that the mics and cameras of participants are disabled, as this is a series of online trainings, so slightly different from the interactive webinars we have with panels and many speakers. We nevertheless welcome your questions via chat through the session. Please indicate which organization is asking the question when you type it, or otherwise use the right click to rename yourself on Zoom in order to show the organization followed by your name. We will try to address as many of those questions as possible during the Q&A, and otherwise compile them so that you will receive answers, and then together with the recording you will receive them. Please note that the session is being recorded. If you stay with us, we assume that we have your consent, as the video will be later posted in our website and disseminated. Next slide, please. So today's session is part of the deliverables of the joint program titled Promoting Sustainable Food Consumption and Production Patterns Through Integrated Tools, Advocacy, and Multi-Stakeholder Action, which is supported by Multi-Partner Trust Fund for SDG 12. This fund is connected to the activities of the One Planet Network, and as you know, this is a network which has the mandate from UN General Assembly to support the implementation of SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production and connected goals. We are basically on this joint program collaborate with UNEP, UNDP, and FAO in the implementation. And it has two major components. The first component aimed at supporting governments to tackle food system issues such as knowledge and understanding of food system, dialogue and collaboration across levels of government, and also at lack of coherence across policy areas, which is mainly led by the colleagues in our sister UN agencies. And the second major component is to support the link between tourism and food sectors in order there to get to know the project and also the deliverables related to the project, I hand over to my dear colleague, Virginia Fernandez-Trapa, Program Officer at UNWTO Sustainable Development of Tourism, and also the coordinator of One Planet Sustainable Tourism Program. Virginia, over to you.
Thank you, Roxana, very much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this fourth session of the online training series on sustainable food in tourism. Within the framework of the joint program that Roxana was just mentioning, that is the program which provides context to this series of trainings, UNWTO is leading the project component on tourism. And actually, this component has the objective to promote a better understanding of the global food system by tourism stakeholders, as well as to make sure that tourism can contribute to more sustainable food systems so that the tourism sector can be actually part of the solution. We heard it, the food system, is the single biggest threat to nature today, as it leads to biodiversity loss in order to produce all the food that we need. And on top of that, 1/3 of food produced globally is wasted, representing 30% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So given the important challenges posed by the global food system, target SDG 12.3 was inserted in the Agenda 2030. This is a target specifically focused on halving food waste. In particular, it speaks about retail, it speaks about consumers and about producers. But we also think that tourism can play a role implementing this target, addressing this target. As you know, food is a key element of the tourism experience, and it is a differentiating factor for tourism destinations. It represents an entry point for circularity, as it can enhance the connection with local supply chains and also minimize food waste. So we're looking forward to, as I said, enhancing the contribution of the tourism sector to the achievement of this target, SDG 12.3 on halving food waste. Next, please. Our sector actually can influence many of the stages of the food value chain, the chain that you see on the slide now, but not all of them with the same intensity. So, for example, through tourism, we can influence food production with our procurement choices, as we saw in previous webinars, or with our choices for the transport that our food is going to be using to reach us. Yet, the impact of our sector in that area, so in the area of production, is somewhat lesser than in food service. It is in food service, in consumption and in disposal that we have, as a sector, a main role to play. Actually, tourism can be quite a driver of change, as the more a food product advances through the value chain, so from left to right, the more costly it becomes and the more environmental footprint it carries with it. So by minimizing food waste at the end of the value chain, we have an opportunity to really speed up change. Next, please. This is why we are promoting collaborative and concerted efforts to reduce food waste, why we have anchored the main deliverable of this project on food waste. We are about to release the global roadmap for food waste reduction in tourism for public consultation. Actually, from 13th of December, it will be available. We will let you know where, and so that you can take a look and let us know if you have any thoughts or contributions to make. This document provides a consistent framework for tourism stakeholders to embrace the sustainable management of food so that it never becomes waste. So it presents a holistic approach to sustainable food management so that food never becomes waste. We need to transition to more sustainable management of food. Food is an entry point for transforming tourism operations. We saw it in the different webinars. We can transform procurement. We can do more sustainable menus. We can focus on sustainable consumption, engaging the tourists that consume the food. And of course, we have to focus on food waste reduction, both from the angle of preventing food waste reduction and from diverting the food waste that we have from landfill. My colleagues mentioned it, food also represents an opportunity to save costs. There is a clear business case, and there's also a climate case, a climate action case, as we saw before, not to mention the humanitarian case that Roxana was referring to. So hopefully with the roadmap, we will support scaling up the efforts of tourism stakeholders in this area, in the area of sustainable food management and transition towards sustainable gastronomy in destinations globally. Next, please. Also, as part of the activities of the joint program, we have enabled a repository of tools and resources, which is related to the sustainable management of food. You can find, for example, toolkits on food waste reduction, or guidelines on the sustainable management of food, and awareness raising and training materials. And among those, you can also find the Sustainable Food Manual published by Futuris, who is our partner for this online training series. Futuris is a German NGO. It's the sustainability initiative of the German travel industry, and its members are tour operators, hotels, and destinations that stand for preserving the heritage of holiday destinations and developing a sustainable future for the travel industry. They have extensive experience implementing research and projects on sustainable food, including projects in hotels and also on cruise lines. I therefore leave you in the good hands of our trainer, Swantje Legners. Swantje has been managing director of projects and cooperations at Futuris since 2015. And in this role, she's responsible for the development and implementation of sustainability projects in cooperation with Futuris member companies. She has successfully accompanied numerous tourism companies and hotel partners in the implementation of projects on sustainable food and on food waste. And before working for Futuris, she was working in the hotel industry as a sustainability manager for a major European tour operator. So with this, I hand over to you, Swantje, for the training. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Virginia, for having me today and for inviting us from the side of Futuris to present today the very important issue of food waste reduction and waste reduction in general in the tourism industry. Very happy to speak to you today about this very, very important issue that we've worked on quite a lot during the last years. So first of all, I would like to look into the issue or the question why food waste is actually such a big problem. And as my colleagues have mentioned before, the biggest reason why that is that actually globally, 1/3 of all food produced is actually going to waste. And this is first and foremost, of course, an ethical and social problem when we know that at the same time we have between 8.9 and 10.5% of the world population actually facing hunger last year. But also, if we waste food, we also waste the precious resources that are put into the production of the food. So on the one hand, for example, 1/4 of the worldwide water use for agriculture is actually lost due to the wasted food. And then also with regards to the climate effects, we know that carbon emissions of food waste globally are around the figure of 6 to 8% of all worldwide emissions. And that's especially shocking when you compare it, for example, with the emissions of the entire tourism industry, which are also about 8%. So food waste adds the same amount of emission as the entire tourism industry to global carbon emissions. And I like this comparison very much because it shows it very clearly how important it is to reduce food waste to actually lower carbon emissions. If food waste was a country, then it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases worldwide. So it would come directly after the US and China in the global ranking of the highest emitting countries. So a lot of reasons why we should definitely start reducing food waste in tourism. Now, really going from the big global perspective towards tourism, what do you think? How much of the food purchased by hotels and restaurants is wasted? Next click, please. It's actually 20 to 60% of the food that is purchased for use in hotels and restaurants is actually thrown away. That we have found out this figure in a very large study we undertook already in 2015 from the Futurist side. And we've in this study we've researched in different hotels around the Mediterranean regarding different sustainable food aspects, and there one of the results of the study was that actually it depends on the hotel, of course, but 20 up to 60% of what is purchased is actually wasted, which is even worse than the 1/3 we know that is wasted globally. Next slide, please. Thank you. Of course, as I said, when you throw away food, you also throw away all of the precious resources that have gone into the production of the food. But also, when you look at it from a financial perspective, actually, when you waste food, you are also throwing money in the bin. There was a very interesting research on this, on the figures that you are actually, on the monetary value that you are actually wasting when wasting food in the UK hospitality and food service sector, done by the NGO RAP. And they actually found out that when 1.1 million tons of food are actually thrown away in the UK hospitality and food service sector, this is costing the industry £3.2 billion per year. So to make this more, to look at this from a business perspective, if you have a gastronomy business serving 1,000 meals per week, this means that your business is losing approximately £27,000 per year due to food waste. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can actually see where those lost money losses or losses of costs are actually coming from. The biggest part is, of course, the food cost. So everything that you bought is there on the right-hand side. The cost for the food you are serving, that's, of course, lost due to the food waste. But the second big part, as you can see on the left side of the pie chart, is actually the labor that has been put into it by your chefs, by your purchasers, by everyone, by the service personnel, by everyone that has been involved with serving this food. So this is also a big part of the lost monetary value that is thrown away when food waste occurs. Next slide, please. Next, please. I've brought with me today two examples from actual Futurist projects we undertook during 2016 to 18, which were all about reducing food waste in hotels and on cruise ships, actually. Because after our initial baseline study, where we found out that 20 to 60% of all food purchased is going to waste, together with our members in Futurist, we decided that this is really the key issue we need to tackle, and where we need to build up know-how how to reduce this food waste in hotels and on cruise ships. So we started with a pilot project on Rhodos with 6 hotels, and already back then we were able to receive a 25% reduction of food waste in all of these hotels. And in total, we were able to save 23 tons of food waste, and that meant that the hotels were actually saving 45,000 euros in costs. We had a further project on the Canary Islands based on the results from this first project with 4 more hotels. There it went even, it was even more successful. 30% reduction could be achieved, and in total 55 tons less food waste, and associated over 100,000 euros of reduced costs were achieved. And then we had our third big project, which was especially interesting because we looked into the food waste reduction on cruise ships, which hadn't been done before actually. So this was a quite innovative project. All of these projects were actually implemented together with United Against Waste, with this NGO that is mentioned here as well. And together we achieved on the cruise ships, that was actually on one of the cruise ships where we achieved the 17% less food waste in the initial project. And the great thing about all of these projects was actually that it became really, really clear that if you implement certain measures, which I will show you in a few minutes, that it's a really conservative estimation that you can reach 25 to 30% reduction. So if you haven't done any measures regarding food waste beforehand, you can be sure that when you apply several measures that I will talk to you about in a few minutes, this 25-30% reduction is absolutely possible, really easily realizable. And the great thing we also saw with this success that that the hotels and the cruise ships had in these pilot projects was that all of the hotel chains that were involved, and also of course TUI Cruises as a big cruise ship company, all of them rolled out the implementation measures that they proved that they were good for food waste reduction among their hotel chains and also among the entire fleet. So that allowed us to even gain more knowledge and achieve more savings with regards to food waste. Next slide, please. Next to the very important argument of saving costs, when you save food waste, there's also a very good argument from the customer side, because we've seen in different studies that the customers are really keen on helping to reduce food waste. Because when we started working with hotels on the subject, there was a lot of fear in the management teams of the hotels that we couldn't really put this into the view of the customers. We couldn't really raise the awareness of the customers for that, because that would somehow limit their comfort or the offer they were experiencing. But the good thing we found out in all of our studies was actually the contrary. The customers, on the one hand, they really want to help you reduce the food waste, and they like to be informed about that. And they even say, as you can see in this graphic here, they would even like to accept smaller portions if that means to reduce waste. So that's also a very, very good reason to get active in the issue of food waste reduction, that it's also making your customers happier. Next slide, please. So now we know everything about the challenges and the opportunities surrounding food waste reduction. So now the big question is, how are we going to do it? How is it done? How can you best achieve the food waste reduction? And I have brought with me today this food waste management hierarchy, because it shows very, very nicely where the biggest potential for saving lies. Because here you can see, of course, what we really don't want to have is much of food waste going to disposal. This should really be the last resort, as you can see on the bottom of this page. And then all of the things that are in the middle here. So you can, of course, recycle the food waste. You can recover it, for example, for energy, etc., for energy use. You can somehow find purposes to reuse the food. But the big takeaway for everyone is really, when you look into food waste reduction, prevention is really where you realize the greatest savings, where you have the best benefits cost-wise and environmental-wise, because the best food waste is, of course, the waste that never occurred. Next slide, please. So to break this down a little bit for you to show where actually food waste in tourism is mostly coming from, you can see on this slide on the left hand side, you can see the different sectors that food waste is occurring in a typical production and consumption process in hotels and restaurants. On the one hand, you have the stock and expiration date, so the waste that is occurring because the food was in the storage and nobody noticed that it was close to the expiration date, or even it has gone rotten. That's the sector of stock waste, where when you have to throw away food because you can really no longer use it or produce something from it. Then you have the production waste that is occurring in the production processes. So when you are in the kitchen, peeling, preparing all of the food waste that is left over there. Then the overproduction, this is actually happening mostly when you serve buffet style meals, because of course there's a lot of food on offer, and there we often have the problem of overproduction because just too much was produced and not everything that has been served or put on the buffet has been eaten. But of course, this also occurs in à la carte style when you do mise en place, and not all of the mise en place is actually used in the end. And then last but not least, you have the plate leftovers, which is really everything that is left over on the guest's plate. So it has been served, it has been taken from the buffet by the guests, and then it's left on the plate. So, and on the right hand side, so those are the four main sectors that food waste can arise in. And on the right hand side, you can actually see which are the most important sectors, what has been found out in different studies on food waste in tourism. And here you can see that stock and expiration date waste, it doesn't play a big role. Most of the hotels and restaurants that have been part of these programs, they had their stock management very well under control. Then production waste, it's not that important, but still there's are some savings to make. But as you can see, where really the big problems, the big challenges lie is the overproduction and the plate leftovers. So this is often the areas, the sectors in your service chain that you should put most emphasis on when you try to reduce food waste. Next slide, please. So as I said, I want to take you with me on the journey through to reducing the food waste. So talk you through this process step by step. What can be done? And the first very, very important learning is really that the old saying, which is used quite a lot in sustainability, I think you can't reduce what you did not measure, is again something that's really, really important and valuable here. Because as we've seen in all our projects on the subject, the hotels and restaurants need to monitor and need to measure their food waste in the first place to be able to analyze it and to be able to find the best reduction measures. Because unfortunately, I will give you some examples how food waste reduction can be achieved in a minute. But unfortunately, there's no ideal recipe for all of the hotels. If you use these 10 tips or something, then you definitely reduce your food waste. But it depends so much on your serving style, whether you have buffets, how you are preparing the food, where you can make the biggest savings. Therefore, I will really, really strongly suggest that if you start looking into the issue of food waste reduction, then start with the monitoring and measuring process first. And for that, it's also very important to segregate the food waste. I will show you in a second how you best do that, to weigh and count the food waste, always in the same way, of course. And I also identify which type of food has, for example, been left on the plate. I've worked with a very, very engaged chef before when I was also working in hospitality. And he actually, he ran more of a smaller type of restaurant. But every time someone came from it was an a la carte style restaurant, every every time a service service staff came in with food with plate waste on the plate, he was asking them to show them to him. So he wanted to see what the type of food has actually been left on the plates, to know what maybe the customers didn't like. So then after you have measured the food waste, it's really, really important to analyze it, because only by analyzing this, you can identify the reduction options. And after that, of course, adjust your menu, buffets, and serving styles according to this analysis. Next slide, please. So as I said, it's very, very important to look into how to do these measurements correctly, to be sure to arrive at an analysis that you can actually use then. So the first step really needs to be that the scope has to be set. So choose the F&B outlets that you want to measure the food waste in. Don't take too many at a time. Maybe start with 1 or 2 outlets to try out the measurement process, and then you can take further outlets into consideration for the next measurements. That's always my suggestion. Then in the second step, you should define the weeks where you want to do the food waste measurement and analysis. And of course, those weeks, they should be comparable. The waste should always be measured at the same time for the same outlet, of course. And it's best if it can be measured for at least 1 week. Then in the third step, it's really, that's the most important step, really to be able to make an in-depth analysis of the food waste and where your food waste is coming from. You have to segregate the food waste to measure it. And it's most easy to segregate it in the following 4 areas, which are according or similar to the areas that most food waste occurs from in tourism. So storage, preparation, overproduction, and plate leftover waste. And you can speak with your kitchen and service personnel on how to best make this preparations to segregate the amount of food waste at the service stations where the people are, where the staff is actually clearing the plates, for example, and also at the kitchen stations. This works quite well if you go into it together with your team and find the best way on how the food waste can be separated and measured. And as it's only for 1 week, and then for a second week to make a comparison, it's definitely something that's doable. Then on the fourth step, you should really specify the total amount of meals prepared and average food costs if you can, because only then you can calculate comparable KPIs, because otherwise, of course, 1 week you had big functions with a lot of guests, and then the other measurement week you didn't. You just had fewer meals, so you have to take into account at least the amount of meals that have been prepared to have comparable KPIs in the end for the analysis. Yeah, and then once you've done this measurement, you can already use the intel you gained from it to define your methods, how to reduce the food waste. And I will show you some examples on the next slide. Oh, sorry, no, there was one thing I wanted to raise your attention to too. No, you can show the next slide, that's fine. What's actually really helpful is that there are some useful tools for food waste measurement already on the market. Many of them are web-based tools or mobile apps even, which make the food waste measurement and tracking so much easier. And they offer really good support. Here's just some examples. You can find very good tools already online. Some are even using smart scale systems, and they are helping you set up this whole measurement logistics in the kitchen. So there's definitely a lot of good resources that you can count on when you want to do the food waste measurements. Next slide, please. yeah, now I'm coming to the practical reduction measures to reduce the food waste that we have actually developed in all of the different projects that we did in Futuris. So here's just some examples for each of the sectors of the food waste reduction sectors, and more examples can definitely be found in our sustainable food manual. For example, there's of course much more. Here I've just brought some examples so you can get an idea with me today. So if you want to look into your storage waste and reducing spoilage there, on the one hand, the biggest opportunity here is, of course, to adjust the purchasing procedures, try to use more just-in-time delivery, especially for fresh food that has to be used quite straight away. Also, of course, the first in, first out method is very, very useful when it comes to that, where you're using the products that you've bought first, where you're using those first to make sure that the use by dates are not overstepped. What also helps is to prepare items like bread, cakes, and desserts in-house, because then you don't have all of these prepared stuff in the storage, which can then, where the use-by date can be overstepped. When you do those things, when you prepare those things yourself, on the one hand, it's of course fresher, but on the other hand, you can use the ingredients also for other stuff. So there is not the risk of those going to waste in the storage area. And then another bit of a trick maybe to use up food that is approaching the use by date is, of course, introducing special dishes of the day, where you can use those foods that where the use by date might be approaching in the next month or weeks. Then when you are looking at production waste, we've seen that the biggest possibilities here for reduction are actually lying in working with the staff on improving the peeling and cutting so that it becomes more economic. You can also set up visual reminders for how the peeling, cutting, for how the recipes are supposed to be put together at the workstation. And you can also look into this very creative approach, which is called nose to tail, which is really all about using as much of a product as possible. For example, when you have when you use meat, you can use the bones to make stock for soups, and there is an entire community about this nose to tail approach, and a lot of recipes and cooking books, etc., have been put on the market. So this is a really interesting approach to look into. Then what's also very useful is to use computer-based systems for recipe management. And I will show you a nice example on the next slide. Because it's a very, very good option to reduce food waste is actually to look into your recipes and to see how they can be managed in a different way. Because this is a very common learning that we have seen, that less ingredients in most cases are actually lowering the food waste, but also the purchasing price, of course. For example, you can here see two different dishes that are quite comparable: a crab salad on the left-hand side, and a bit more sophisticated, maybe trio of crab dish here, where you have about 3 times as many ingredients as for the crab salad. You have many more cooking processes. This needs a lot of more time from your chefs to prepare this. And especially the trio of crab has a much higher purchasing price and food waste associated with it. And the great news is also that when those two different recipes were tested, the crab salad actually had the better reviews from the customers. So the customers actually like this better. So it doesn't have to be so complicated to make the customers happy. Next slide, please. Here, here are the last two sectors in food waste reduction, and those are, remember, those are the two sectors where you can actually make the biggest difference. So when you're looking at overproduction, we've seen that working with your buffets is a very, very good and necessary option to reduce the food waste with regards to overproduction. One thing is really to improve the communication between kitchen and chefs, between kitchen and the service personnel, because the main issue with overproduction for buffets is mostly that, of course, hotels and restaurants want to present and provide the choice for all of their customers, the great, beautiful choice that they are having, and they want to provide it for every customer, even if this customer is coming right 10 minutes before the end of the buffet. And this is, of course, very understandable. But if you improve the communication between the kitchen and service personnel, for example, by implementing information systems, if you have a big F&B outlet, for example, with digital screens where the service personnel can very easily tell the kitchen how many customers are still expected, are still forecast to come, then the chefs and the kitchen staff can actually put out only and prepare only the further food portions that are needed for those more and more limited number of customers. What's also a good trick is you still offer the same choice of foods, but you offer it in smaller food containers, smaller bowls. If you are approaching the end of the buffet, nobody will notice, and like this, it's very, very easy to avoid food waste. If you are looking in a la carte restaurants, a pre-order system can be very useful here, because then, of course, if you have guests pre-order 1 or 2 days beforehand what they want to eat, then you only have to, then you can only purchase and only prepare what is needed. Looking into the last sector here, which is plate leftovers. One very, very useful option here to reduce the food waste is to introduce more show and front cooking, because it has been seen that this allows for better portion control. So the chefs are actually then preparing the food in front of the customer. This is a very good quality plus, of course, as well, but they can also control the portions, and the customer cannot overload their plates when the chefs are actually giving out those portions. Then, as you can see here on the right hand side, I really like this example. It's really offering smaller portions in a very high quality presentation form. For example, with these big spoons, or like very small, nice looking bowls or little plates, which look nice, but where the customers will then only take one of these spoons or one of these little dishes. And like this, it's very easy to nudge them towards not taking more than they actually can eat. Same goes for smaller plates, smaller serving spoons, or little nudging possibilities to reduce what the customers are putting on their plates. What we've seen with plate leftovers is actually that bread is a big driver, especially when bread is just put on every table without asking the customers if they want it. So why not ask the customer before serving the bread if they are really interested in having it? And then last but not least, an option for a la carte restaurants is to offer different portion sizes to suit various appetites. For example, when you offer something for lighter eaters and for children, then the portions for those customer groups can be smaller, of course, and then the customer can choose what size of portion they want to take. Next slide, please. A very, very nice way of reducing food waste and also taking the customers with you on this journey is to be very open and active in the communication of your activities towards reducing food waste. And as I said in the beginning, it's nothing that the customers will be afraid of or don't want to hear. It's actually the other way around. The customers will like it very much if you are openly communicating about what you are doing to reduce the food waste. as we've seen in a test we did in hotels in Gran Canaria and Turkey. This is not only that the customers are liking this, but it's also very, very effective. Can you click once more, please? Because we've seen that just by implementing several communication methods like this plate that you are seeing here, which is a sign at the buffet where it says that the customers are invited to go several times to the buffet and not to overload their plate. This is a humorous way to inform the customers about this. On the right hand side, you can also see a table display where the customers were informed about all of the actions that the hotel is actually doing to reduce food waste. And we did a scientific study on the effects of this signage, and it actually the results were very positive, because just by implementing the signage, so no other reduction measures were implemented at the same time, just the signage, already by this 15% of the food waste on the guest plates was reduced. Next slide, please. Yeah, coming to the end of my presentation, one further thing regarding waste reduction when it comes to the food offer is, of course, also packaging waste, because when, of course, as you know, when you are purchasing food, often this food is coming in a lot of packaging. So it's very important to work with your suppliers to reduce this packaging. Maybe you can, for example, ask your staff to provide feedback whenever the food seems to be overpackaged, because then you can get into a dialogue with your suppliers on that. Where possible, it's very, very good if the suppliers can offer return packaging or can package the product in recyclable materials like cardboard. Then also, if it's possible, and if you know that the products will be used, then it's also a good thing to buy in bulk. When you are looking at providing water for your customers, it's very, very good and easy way to provide refillable bottles or carafes, like you can see here on the right hand side on the bottom. These water bottles, you can refill them with a dispenser, and they are also a really nice opportunity to put the company brand on it, etc. So this is an option that many hotels are already using at the moment. And then on the top hand side, top right side here, you will also see the dispensing system, which you can use not to put small sachets of sauces, etc. out on the buffet. Next slide, please. Which should be my, you can skip this one, please. Yeah, this was the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, so that we have enough time for the Q&A session. As we said, it's very, very important that the prevention methods to reduce food waste are actually put at the very center of your activities. But of course, we know that they will not that we will not achieve the point that there is no food waste at all. So here are some recovery and recycling options that we would like to show you. One is, of course, to offer takeaway containers, so-called doggy boxes for your customers, or even encourage the customers to bring their own, for example, Tupperware, to avoid packaging waste here. Then the redistribution to other people, so not the guests but other people, is also a very good opportunity. The Too Good To Go app is something that's quite big in Germany already. It's an app where actually restaurants can put in certain foods that they haven't sold at the end of the day, and then they can be sold to customers which have this app at a much reduced price. And this is something that's very, very used a lot. Of course, if it's possible and something that your staff likes, then you can redistribute the food to the staff. And if it's possible in your country, and that's also, of course, something that's that has to be checked legally, is food donations to food banks, for example. Then as the next possibility, you can also, only where it's legally possible, use the leftovers as animal feed. Then you can recycle what has been left over from the food waste. For example, you can convert this into nutrients for the garden. There are several systems, food hydrators or composting systems that are on the market to do exactly that. You can also convert the food waste, of course, to energy. There are also some small scale solutions for that, biogas systems that can be installed actually at the side of a hotel. So this is also an option to actually use the energy directly at your hotel again that you can get from the food waste. But then also the last before disposal resort would also be the recovery when the food waste is used for energy generation, for example. Yes, I think this brings me to the end of the presentation. Here are some tips, and yes, we can start with the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Swantje, for the presentation. Very reaching and complete. I very much like the fact that you closed reminding all of us about the hierarchy, which I think is something to be kept in mind, how much or how important it is not to shift the focus from prevention being the most important task that we have to accomplish, prevent food waste, but keeping in mind that there are other things to do when we cannot prevent, as you said it, basically preventing in the first place and then redistributing surplus food that does arise and diverting surplus that cannot be used to feed people into animal feed when it's permitted, or high value biomaterial processing. Basically where food cannot be prevented, it should be diverted from landfill to more environmentally beneficial disposal routes like anaerobic digestion, composting. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of possibilities. So thank you so much. I can see already some questions popping up in the chat, Swantje, so I'll read them out for you. Let's start with something that I already have in mind, if you agree. Basically, you were telling us also about the importance of engaging the guests and how most of the guests are actually open to contribute and collaborate in this type of efforts if they are well explained. So how can we motivate hotel and restaurant staff like to support the food waste reduction measures so that they don't see it as an extra task? I mean, how can they be motivated as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think I witnessed a very special moment with regards to that in the past, because you know when you have your normal buffet, when it's your normal process that you have all of this food coming back from the buffet, and due to legislation or something you just have to throw it away, you're not really thinking about it anymore. And what really helped with regards to this, with regards to really getting into depth and motivating the staff to work on food waste reduction, was to do a picture protocol of all what was left on the buffet in the end, and to put this include this in a general awareness raising session. So first of all, of course, it's very important to make staff aware of all of the problems that are associated with food waste. So all of the resource use, the cost that is actually just thrown in the bin, the money that is wasted, and then to show them really in pictures what is going to waste from the really great, nice, beautifully served food that is that they have, and that is very much in the center of every service staff or kitchen staff that is proud of their offer, that they don't want the food that they have put work in and produced and served so nicely is just ending in the bin. And yeah, we've seen that these sessions, awareness raising sessions, and then combined with picture protocols of the actual buffets, were helping so much, or of guest plates that are coming back where you can see the food waste. That those helped a lot to really make it visible what's thrown away.
Thank you, Swantje. I suppose that it's also very important that the managers are engaged, right? So that the staff in the kitchens has the necessary maneuver and support to implement all these measures. We have, it's more of a comment than a question in the chat from Ibrahim Sadiq Dawood. He says, the habits of some cultures affect on food waste. It is a bad habit among the Arabs to leave some food on the plate so that it does not appear to be improper. No, that's a comment for all of us. It's interesting to see the different cultural perspectives towards food. In this case, it's helping the cause. So happy to learn about this. Thank you for bringing it up. Then we have a question from Tuxe Sonmes asking, food to go or donations? When it comes to food safety, how do you evaluate this? Indeed, it will affect human health in the worst case scenario, depending on the food composition and ingredients.
Yeah, I mean, for this is for every solution that we showed, that means giving the food that you have left over to other people and also to animals. This has to be legally checked in your region, of course. I mean, we know for Germany here, this Too Good To Go process works quite well, and it's also legal to use it. So I suppose there will be checks from the health authorities here that will check which of the foods that are thrown away or that can no longer be served in the restaurant, which of these foods can still be offered by this Too Good To Go app, for example, or when you're donating it to a food bank. This is really up to the health authorities, I think, in all the different countries. And of course, before offering this, it has to be checked what's legally possible in your destination. Yeah.
Exactly, and it's not easy to get a comprehensive mapping actually of where is it allowed, what's allowed, and where not. Same for animal feed. I think there is a lot of specific regulations on what can be sent for animal feed. And then also for international operators, they are bound to international catering waste regulations, for example, that would be affecting the food in planes or the food in cruise liners. So basically, as usual, sustainability is context sensitive, and you need to understand where you are operating to make the best out of the actions that you are implementing. Let's see, we have one more question here, Swante from Cleopatra Luxurt. She says, leftovers considered as risky food accordingly to different resources. How to use leftovers without affecting the health of the consumer? Could you please share data that shows that it's legal to use leftover in Germany accordingly to your authorities? I think we partially answered already, but I leave it to you if you want to add a few more points, Swante.
Yeah, as I said, it's probably really depending on the kind of food you want to provide. I think it probably it works best if you have prepared certain portions of something where you can really show that this hasn't been touched or anything. But regarding the exact legal procedures, it really depends on the country, I would say. But yeah, we would definitely also like to stress again that this should only be used when you don't see a possibility to prevent the food waste in the first place, right? So it's very, very important that this is the main takeaway, that prevention is the key to the savings, and that this is where it all should start and where most of the efforts should be applied.
Exactly. And if, as the takeaway of this training, besides the importance of prevention, you also know that redistribution is possible, I'm sure you will find the way in your context within your regulatory framework and do your best to minimize food waste after all. I don't see any more questions in the chat, Swante, but I want to ask you one more thing, if you agree. I mean, tracking waste in the kitchen, for example, if we picture a full restaurant in a hotel and the kitchen staff are all very busy, how tracking the waste in that particular moment, you know, when they are at full speed, could be very challenging. So do you have any recommendations? How can food food waste still be properly captured in times of, you know, stress, peak hours in the buffet in the restaurant?
yeah, I think there it's very, very important to discuss with your staff, with your teams, how they would like to accomplish this, and which ways they are seeing. I mean, I've seen different processes. For example, when you have your service station where you clear away the plates, then it's quite a common procedure in many hotels that you segregate the food waste from paper napkins that you have on there, or plastics that you have on there or something. So this can be done very easily at the station, where you have different, I don't know, 3 different nice looking bowls or buckets, where you directly at the service station, when you clear the plate and you have to scrap the stuff on the plate anywhere, somewhere, anyhow, at this point, there it's still a good possibility to actually do the segregation. So not to have anyone do several steps in addition. And also in the kitchen, when you have the production procedures there, it's also quite easy to put a big bowl where all of the scraps are going, all of the peelings, etc. So I think the most important point is to really discuss this with your staff and look at their workflows, at their processes, and ask them, what do you think? Where can we best install this segregation process? And then jointly, I think the best solutions can be developed. And we've seen that this has been very, very successful in all of the projects we've seen. And the good thing is also, you can always tell them it's only for a week now, and then maybe for another week to have a comparison in 2 weeks time. And by this, it's also, they don't have to get afraid that they will need to do this forever now, but it's just for the measurement process. And like this, I think it's a very it's quite easy to get them motivated, because and the biggest motivation really comes from the reduction that you will see. It really comes from when you've done the first measurement and you can actually show where the most waste is occurring. That's the situation where the staff are really getting engaged into that, and are really seeing this also a bit of as a challenge, where they can engage and where they really can reduce this and do something good. So this I would recommend.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Swantje, and thank you, everyone. We have completed the 1 hour training now, so it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And this is also the 4th and last training of our online series. I hope we can continue with this type of activities next year, and see you all there. Tomorrow we have 1 additional session in Spanish. So if you are a Spanish speaker and you wish to join, it will be at 4 p.m. Madrid time, speaking about sustainable management of food in general. And we hope to keep connected. And thank you so much for your interest. We are dropping in the chat the link to the 7th UNWTO World Forum on Gastronomy Tourism, which will take place on 13th December in Japan, where the global roadmap on food waste reduction will be
Oh, you're mute.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for having me. Thanks. Bye-bye.